I'd like to introduce Tom Kravitz from CNET. Everyone's bios are in your flyer, so I'm not going to, regurgitate anything. But one thing that's really exciting is Tom just got engaged 2 weeks ago. So let's give him a hurrah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My fiance wishes she could be here, but, what are you going to do? So thanks, everybody, for coming. My name, again, is Tom Kravitz. I'm a writer for CNET. I've been writing about mobile for the last 3 or so years, really starting with my coverage of Apple and the launch of the iPhone. And I think that all of us here would agree, no matter where we sit on the fanboy side of things, that that event changed our industry. And so we're here to talk about why this is really the future of computing and where the opportunities are for all of you. So why should you care about this? We've been talking about this for 2 or 3 years, right? Well, it's not too late. It's just that simple. I mean, as Gigi said, people are just starting to realize what they can do with mobile devices and just starting to realize what kind of apps are out there for them to take advantage of. I mean, this is the future of computing. I mean, the PC is looking so pedestrian these days. It's just innovation is not there. This is where it is. And I think that's what's interesting about this market as well is that this is a market where the niche is everything. If you can find the one little thing that someone out there locks into, you're going to do well. I mean, you look at, I saw an app on there the other day. It was a $25 rangefinder when you're on the golf course. I mean, what a great idea. That would, totally replace a handheld GPS. You've just got it right there on your phone. And then, of course, you've got all the 99-cent fart apps you could want in the world. So, you can make a lot of money off of that. One of the guys who came up with one of those fart apps made $250,000 in the first year. So I don't know what that says about our world, but anyway. I mean, this is the personal computer. It's almost too bad that the personal computer name has been taken because this is the personal computer. And whichever one of you figures out the new name for this other than smartphone, you might make more money off of that than you will off your apps. But the point is that, this is where companies are looking. This is where the innovation is. This is where companies like Apple and Microsoft and Palm and RIM and others we haven't even, heard of yet are spending billions and billions of dollars. So you want to build an app, where are you going to build it? If you look at the worldwide market share at the moment, Symbian is, of course, the dominant player. Those of you who don't get outside of North America much may be wondering about that, but it's still true. Although the trend has been going the other way, they're still by far the largest smartphone operating system player in the business, with RIM, Windows Mobile, and Apple trailing close behind. So if you're looking at a broader sense of where you might want to develop an app, that's one thing to think about. Although Symbian is very much a platform in flux right now. This is for Q1 of 2009. Sorry. In North America, things are very different. RIM by far the dominant player based on several years of penetration into the enterprise and more recently starting to look at the consumer market more closely. You've got Apple gaining, I think that's like 19% of the market in 2 years, which is a pretty substantial gain, outpacing Windows Mobile, which has been around for a while. And then we're starting to see this new thing called Android, which is pretty small given that it's only really on one carrier at the moment, but in the second half of this year might start to become a little bit more interesting. And then, of course, you look at Symbian, it's pretty much non-existent in North America because of Nokia's inability to get their devices subsidized by carriers out there. So what are you going to do? You can decide a couple of different things. Apple, you look at their model, you've got one operating system to focus on, and you've got one type of phone to focus on. If you develop for the iPhone, you're going to have a touch screen. You're going to have a screen size of, that exact screen size. And that's going to run on all the iPhones that are out there. I mean, some interesting things are about to happen with the iPhone as they launch this newer, faster one, and whether or not that will create some sort of split in the App Store between apps that can handle the faster processing and apps that can't, but we'll just have to see how that goes. You could do something like what Paul might be doing, which is having an operating system out there that they put out for one phone right now, but that they go out and license to all kinds of different kinds of phones and other types of handset makers. So you'll have to deal with touch screens, you'll have to deal with other kinds of input methods. You know, you might find the OS compelling, but you have to wonder about that as well. And then you've got something like RoMobile, which is a totally different idea, where you can write for one platform and have that application run across devices all over the place. So there's lots to think about. So I think the easiest piece of advice for any developer is the same advice that they give you when you're trying to decide if you want to be a writer, which is write what you know. And I think you should develop what you know. You know, I mean, this is the thing we talked about a little bit earlier. Personalization and niches in this market are so huge. And there's room out there for somebody who thinks the way that you do. And if you have that great idea that you know is a great idea because you know that particular market so well, then chances are a lot of other people may feel the same way. And in doing that, you have to know your audience. I mean, I think that, you know, one of the more interesting things over the last couple of years has been the blurring of the line between the business user and the consumer user of these devices. When we were talking about this market 3 years ago, it was pretty much exclusively an enterprise market, and that has changed a lot. And so do you make an application that's pure consumer, pure business, something in between? You know, there's a lot of opportunities out there depending on who your target audience is. And then, you know, there's also the fact that you must consider what exactly is most relevant for your application. You know, there's lots of different local issues. There's lots of different, you know, some geographies may, you know, want certain types of applications more than others. There's obviously a lot to come into play there. And then you have to understand the trade-offs of whatever decision you make. We've been talking about Apple a lot, so let's talk about Apple a little bit more. What are the pros of developing for Apple? You got a device that's out there and it's got all the buzz in the world with a user interface that, you know, has really changed the way that phones are developed. And you've got iTunes as the distribution model, which is, you know, on hundreds of millions of computers around the world. What's the downside? Apple owns your app. They control the distribution. They control whether or not it gets onto the store, and there's just no getting around that. And they also control whether or not your app can be a hit. There's 35,000 applications on the App Store. Becoming the one that stands out among that is a very difficult thing to do. If you don't get featured on those top 10 lists or on those staff picks, you know, you have a lot of work to do to get yourself to stand out among the different apps that are out there. So I think one of the more important things to do is to don't tie yourself down. I was talking about something earlier with a few folks about how, you know, mobile web applications, while today aren't really that compelling, you know, could one day offer you a chance to develop an application that doesn't tie you down to a platform. We're seeing web apps on the desktop becoming just as much of a platform choice as the operating system itself. And that may take a while, but that could happen one day in the handset market as well. And then to the point that I was just making, you're going to need to rely on yourself to do a lot of the marketing on your own, to get information about your app out there. There's just no substitute for doing your own legwork. So, you know, I think that sort of sets the stage a little bit, and I'd like to invite our panelists to come up. I guess we'll bring Steve up first. Steve developed the famous Trism, which has made him quite a bit of money and quite a bit of opportunity out there. So he'll be talking about that a little bit. So Steve, why don't you come on up? Bring up Adam next. Adam is the CEO of RoMobile. RoMobile, for those of you who are not familiar, is a project to allow you to write to, I'm going to butcher this, so I'll let you explain it a little bit better, but allow you to basically achieve the write once, run anywhere dream that a lot of people have heard before. And so, Adam, why don't you come up and we'll get into all of that. Matt Murphy runs the iFund, and his cell phone is not in your program, unfortunately. He's a partner at Kleiner Perkins and has done a lot of work overseeing the iFund, which, for those of you who are not familiar, is a fund for iPhone applications and companies built around that. So, Matt, come on up. We'll bring up Pam next, Vice President of Developer Marketing for Palm. Palm is back. They have a new phone out there called the Pre, which you may or may not have heard of. And last but of course not least, we'll bring up Tyler. Tyler's Director of BlackBerry Alliances and Developer Relations for Research in Motion. And we're going to have lots of interesting things to talk about how RIM is moving from the business market to the consumer market as well. So come on up, Tyler.
So before we get into the discussion, actually something we missed telling you was if you have a question, there are volunteers on the side with yellow cards. Just request them, write down your question, and give it back, move it forward, and then we're just going to make sure we give it to Tom. Thanks. Bye.
So I'd like to ask you guys to, I guess we'll just go down the row, and if you could sort of introduce yourselves a little bit better than I did, and tell people why it is that you're here and what it is that interests you in the world of mobile computing. So why don't you go ahead, Adam?
So I'm the CEO of Rummable, and we offer an open source framework called Roads, which allows developers to write native smartphone apps one time, and they run on all shipping smartphones, with the exception of the Pre until we get your SDK. So these are true native apps that take advantage of all device capabilities and feature sync data, very much not web apps. And I can't imagine a better panel to sit around to talk about device diversity.
Matt Murphy from Kleiner Perkins. I've been at Kleiner Perkins for 10 years. About 14 months ago, we launched the iFund with Apple, which is something that we started talking to Apple about a year and a half ago, shortly after they launched the phone, and we're excited to hear that they were actually going to come out with an SDK and an app store, and figured finally after trying to invest in mobile for 10 years, things were going to get pretty interesting. And at the time, I don't think anybody had any idea that we'd be seeing 50,000 applications and 1 billion downloads, so clearly it's gone way beyond everybody's expectations, but we'll talk more about that through the panel.
Pam Daziel. I'm responsible for reinvigorating the developer community that has been a long and proud tradition at Palm. We're currently doing that by holding out on y'all and not giving anybody an SDK. So, you know, building that anticipation is the strategy. It's intentional. And anybody who hands me a business card tonight, however, you can get yourself in the program. So we'll start with that.
Tyler Lessard, Research in Motion. I've had the unique opportunity to spend the last 8+ years at RIM in the BlackBerry application world. I've started off working a lot with our enterprise developer community, wireless operators, customers, and helping to build up best practices around application development for BlackBerry and go-to-market strategies. Last couple of years, I've had the joy of focusing more on the consumer side of things, a little bit more exciting working with the ESPNs of the world than the SAPs and IBMs. But not to say the CRM and ERP space isn't have its moments for sure. But we've you know, had an exciting 8 years of building up a community, and really, you know, things are just starting to happen. As you've heard, it's really in its infancy, even though we're 8 years into this business. So, you know, excited to meet more of you and discuss some interesting topics around apps.
All right. So my name is Steve Demeter. I was the first rags to riches story on the App Store with my game Trism. It's certainly something I never expected to have happen to me. I just wanted to write a game that maybe if it was downloaded by 10 people and maybe I got an email from one, I would have been happy with that. But thanks to the tremendous success of Apple, they've allowed me to really go forward and accomplish my dream of having a game company. Going forward, we're focusing on you know, fundamentally new types of games that push the industry forward.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. So, Steve, I'm going to actually hit you with the first question there.
Okay.
I mean, I think one thing that a lot of people want to know is how do you get started? You know, how do you, if you want to get into this business, what do you have to do to get yourself up and running? So could you talk a little bit about the process that you went through in deciding you were going to try and make a go of this?
Well, I mean, it's such a broad question. I didn't really follow the path that I think a lot of guys would have gone. I had a day job, and I wrote the game in my spare time, and it just happened to work out for me. I'd say if you want to get started, I think the best place to start is, like you're saying, Tom, just do what you know. You know, I wrote a game that I knew I could deliver in 4 months to get it out there by the launch of the App Store. I find that when I rely on people, I rely too much on people, and when I rely on myself, I rely way too much on myself, and I'd rather have the latter, especially when I'm bootstrapped.
So this was a solo project the whole way?
I wrote 98% of the Trism myself. I did all the code, all the graphics. I hired a guy in San Jose to do the backgrounds for the puzzle levels, but he ended up like kind of sucking. So I had to redo it all, but yeah.
Hopefully he's not here.
Don't record that part. Yeah.
Adam, I know you've been a mobile developer for a very long time as well. I mean, what would you say to people who are wondering how to get started in this business right now?
Well, I like what you said about writing what you know. I'm also a big believer in just in being agile and writing small things and then listening to your user base and building on that. And we've tried to make that very easy to do in the framework, make it easy to start, get something built quickly, do the 80-20 rule and 20% of the effort and 80% of the features, and just iterate on that. And I'm interested if that was part of the success that you had, but I've seen developers do really well with that. Get the core value proposition out there, get users using it, listen to what they want, and then just iterate on it.
What was different about mobile development as opposed to other types of development you've done in the past?
Well, I mean, mobile development, one of the things we try to do with Roamable is mobile development has always been typically sort of a backwater of difficulty of development. Some of the developers that I've worked with and have worked for me are in the audience, and we always commented how like doing mobile development is really cool because you get on the device, but like in the actual tools and the languages, it's like going back 20 years. And so what we're trying to do is provide a little bit of, and we're not the only people trying to do it. Now that there's this robust market, we're tools vendors really investing in making mobile development modern. But talk to any developer, and I love the iPhone and the way it's created the app development market, but I can remember in the 80s, the mid-80s, mind you, talking about how Objective-C was obsolete. So, and this is now the new cool thing. It's shocking.
Comes around, goes around, all that. So for those of you who are more on the developer relations side of things, what do you look for in a successful developer or a successful application or a successful company that you may want to take a closer look at?
Sure. I'll start with that. I mean, I think Steve's experience was he launched at both one of the hardest and the simplest times. It was the simplest because the App Store was wide open, and it was the hardest because you had no idea what users were really going to like or how big it was going to be. I think now as you look out at the App Store with 50,000 applications, many categories, you can see what's working and what's not working. So the main thing, I think, is to focus on, we've got it posted on our web, kind of the 10 lessons of what we think are working on the App Store. But it's really about simplicity, lightweight, immediately engaging, single-user utility. And that's kind of the state of play of where we are right now. But I think that's a good starting point, as Adam, you were pointing to kind of get going, get an audience, learn from them, get out there quickly. Companies that we've seen fail have tried to make the application too complex out of the gate, and the mobile user just doesn't seem to be ready for that yet. Start with something simple, and you can have a massive ambition behind that, but get your users into engaging, and then expand the scope beyond that.
Yeah, I would say you said something earlier about these are personal devices and they're blurring the lines between work and consumer or enterprise and consumer. If you ask me what are the things to focus on, user experience, instant gratification, worry less about gaming the system and more about taking advantage of what's there in the platform that you're working on.
Yeah, I absolutely echo that point, and I think we really focus on partners who have really nailed the user experience. And where we come from, we want our customers to ultimately have the apps that they feel are going to be valuable to them on a daily basis. And we also like apps, and I think we all do in the handset and the tool space, apps that showcase our platforms, right? BlackBerry has different capabilities and differentiation. Palm Pre has different capabilities, and the iPhone has different capabilities. And we see a lot of failed applications that try to deliver the same experience across all handhelds. And we really look for applications that feel like they shipped out of the box on the device. That when a user installs it, it shouldn't feel like it's some orphan application that came from who knows where. It really should feel like it's a part of the device, that it takes advantage of the unique capabilities, and feels like a native application to the user. And I think those are, again, important things as you look at the different platforms, is understanding what they're capable of and how to really make it shine, and essentially show off back to the platform vendor, hey, look what I can do with your platform, and really make it shine and make users really excited about it.
So
Which we recognize puts an incredible burden on you, because every single phone is entirely different, and you got to redo everything individually.
We're building a big market for them.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's time to bring up that question then. I mean, we've got, what, 6 mobile operating systems? How many do we need?
One.
I mean, consolidation in this industry has been talked about for a long time, but we've actually seen the opposite, I think, over the last year or so. What's going to be done about this? How are these choices going to be made, and what's going to dictate who survives?
So just sort of maybe partially answering that and jumping off on your point about showing off device capabilities. So people will say, well, so Rose is done, what are you doing? So all we really do is spend time on device capabilities. But there's this thesis that, okay, to take advantage of all the cool stuff that phones do, and it's great that phones take advantage of, camera and GPS and PIM contacts and SMS, for example. Those are some capabilities that we expose. And so I absolutely believe that if your mobile app is not taking advantage of some fairly robust set of that where it could, it's sort of a failed mobile app. It's a myopic PC port, so I couldn't agree more. But I'll also go further in saying, if there's a way, not necessarily through our framework, I think there'll be other frameworks out there, but if there's a way that you can write your app so that it is taking advantage of location awareness and knowledge of who people know on the phone and camera and all the cool capabilities without writing it 6 times, that's something that you as developers should investigate.
My sense is that one is probably a good answer, but that's not reality for forever, really. And so the question is, how does this evolve over time? And I think in the next 5 or so years, we're not going to see a lot of change, because I think too many of the incumbents are way too vested in their OS. And they're assuming that it's going to give them some competitive advantage. They can create a wall around their own app store because they have the OS, or it can make their device better, all this stuff. And at the end of the day, they could probably all use one and be just fine. But it's just, they're way too vested, and they're not going to move off it until they hit a wall and they have to. And then we'll see what happens.
We're all control freaks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, and again, I don't think I could argue that there will be a good number of OSs out there, and I'd hate to say there could even be new entrants still at this point, right?
Well, the pie is still getting bigger, right? I mean, so
it is.
But I mean, I guess at what point does the complexity get too much to bear?
Yeah. I think just so from my perspective, and I talk to a lot of developers about this when they look at BlackBerry and working on our platform, and just to give you a bit of insight into some of the things that happen out there, the challenges we have in the smartphone business is, it's from a handset perspective, it's a world of constraints that you have to work in. And there's a lot of differences in terms of how you design the hardware and the operating system to work with the chipsets and so on, based on what you care about for your user experience. And so again, it comes back to, in the BlackBerry world, based on where we come from in our user base, we are extremely committed to maintaining a long battery life, because we know our users depend heavily on these products for day-to-day business usage and heavy communications. They're doing a lot of data traffic, and they rely on it heavily, and so therefore, we have to design an operating system that optimizes and works with the chipsets properly to handle that. And we also have, of course, very important security requirements in the enterprise side, which when we started our operating system, there was really no option out there in the market that lived up to what we needed. And if we had adopted a standard operating system, we wouldn't have gotten the penetration that we had in the enterprise and built up that business. And all of the other handset manufacturers face those same challenges. So there is some reality behind why it's happened. I would tend to agree that at some point things could come back based on when there's enough technology under the covers. But based on the investment we've seen, I think it will continue to stay where we are.
Have you ported Trism, Steve?
There is an Android version out there right now, and we're considering Storm. Yeah.
We usually hear 3 to 5. If we talk to the mobile developers, there are some who have committed to a single platform.
Yeah.
But in general, they're centering around, I'll support 3 platforms. That's consistent, I think.
I just want to give a shout out to your Konami code, by the way.
Did you
It's
like
a nice
that?
touch. Yeah, so we're looking at that right now.
But I think the thing that could shift this the most is really where the developers are concentrated. And right now we see a lot of developers obviously concentrated on the iPhone, some early seeds of that on Android, but wherever, and RIM, obviously. So, and early.
Early.
But anyway,
I
shout out
believe the usual
my
order is
panelists.
first comes
Right.
SDK and
Right.
then come application.
Exactly. Anyway, I mean, ultimately, people like yourselves who are developing applications are going to determine what that shift in landscape, what will happen. Because I think more and more we're going to see users going to phones that have the right applications, and that was never part of the purchase decision before, and now it's front and center.
Well, I think we'll take a question from the audience now because we were going to go here anyway. But there's a question from the audience about operators, carriers, those lovely people who are not represented on stage today, so they're going to be in for a whipping probably. But when you look at, so the question is basically who will win and why between a device store versus an operator store versus a off-deck store, which I assume is just some sort of, an internet store of some port. And so this is a two-part question. The other part is, what is the role of operators in application development, if any? And I'm sure there is a role. So who wants to take that one first? Show of hands. Love it. That's great.
I'll take a first stab, and I'll let it go downhill from there. In our world, I really do actually see an important role for the operators, and we are actually working very closely with the operators to make this work, because a big role the operators do play is end user support, both of the device that they're using and potentially of the applications that they want to proactively push out into their base. As well, of course, marketing. They own the customer data, and they have the opportunity to reach out directly to those customers and promote what they wish. And because of that, obviously, they have a lot of great power, which can be used to our advantage. And so we do see a hybrid model evolving, and I think we'll continue to see evolutions in that. I don't think we see a clear winner in the near term of an OEM store versus a carrier store. I think the off-deck store is going to be a big challenge in the next couple of years as users migrate to the device itself and what comes on there. But we do see the opportunity for the OEM stores to really sort of merge with the carriers so that they have some capabilities to control what is featured and promoted to their users versus what sort of sits back as the long tail of applications, so that it is clear when they want to feature an application and have potentially millions of users download it, everybody in the ecosystem wants to make sure they're ready for that and they can support that application, knowing that they're going to be more and more complex, right? It's not going to be single games. They're going to be complex applications integrating with LBS, integrating with the camera, and so on. So that is a big part that we see is we can't underestimate that perspective of how you manage the distribution and the support of the device and the users. Over time, that dependence may go away, though, as things become a little bit simpler.
Yeah, I think you're right. Going back to user experience and instant gratification, the off-deck stores are going to have a hard time just because they don't meet the frictionless test in most cases. Not to say that they won't exist, because they'll serve a set of needs that are probably a little less mainstream. The carriers are learning. They're experimenting. I think everybody recognizes that it's early days. Everybody recognizes what's going on the iPhone as disruptive and innovative at the same time, and I think you're going to see a lot of experimentation on all fronts and recognition that there's a shared customer out there.
Yeah. I would say app stores are good for everybody, right? I mean, it's obviously good for consumers, but even for the carriers, because for so long, their best app store was selling about 2.5 applications per handset life. And so now with the iPhone, you've got over 30. So they understand the opportunity now, and it's going to force them to up their game. And if they don't, weren't really losing anything anyway because they weren't selling that much. So the most contemporary view out of carrier I've heard is that shame on us if we can't offer a really good store and somebody else kicks our butt, with their own store. And I think the more that kind of thinking can pervade the industry, the better off they're going to be and the whole App Store ecosystem will be.
As long as they keep in mind that the developers got to make a living. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the thing that really choked the life out of
Right.
the opportunity previous to the iPhone,
But-
and that's really the
Right,
critical
and
thing.
before nobody could, I mean, you could, but on deaf ears scream bloody murder about
Yeah.
the revenue splits, but now they have to be embarrassed when they look and people are saying 30 and 20% splits and they're still trying to get 50. So I think that's changing as well.
Well, one thing I've sort of always wondered about this is how do you deal with the customer confusion? I mean, if you've got multiple stores, how do I know where to go? How do I know why I should go to one store versus another? And as a developer, does my cut change if my application is featured in the operator store versus in a different kind of store?
I don't know, if I end up at the mall, I can tell which store I'm going to.
Yeah.
Personally.
So
I
is
don't
it
think the customers are that confused.
I mean, where the confusion can come is if there's a different experience post-sale, and you look at some stores that manage the post-sale experience differently in terms of when you get alerted for updates, or if you buy a new device, do you get those apps back afterwards, or do you have to go and buy them again? We don't see a ton of fragmentation yet in terms of the different store experiences. There seem to be some fairly consistent models, but I mean, I think it's going to be a couple of years of seeing. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a lot of cases where there are operator stores, OEM stores, and potentially 2 or 3 different spots. And I think eventually we'll consolidate, but I think we are in for a couple of years of a bit of a mishmash. But hopefully, as you said, users are okay with the experience and can find what they want where they want.
Okay. Well, let's take another audience question. A VC mantra is that VCs invest in ideas that companies can build around, that companies can be built around, not just products.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really think, I think this one is for you, Matt.
Okay.
Do you really think companies can be built around iPhone apps? And will they really offer the typical returns that VCs require, or are you changing your expected returns from the iFund?
I absolutely believe we'll have VC-type returns on the iPhone and more broadly speaking in mobile. I mean, we've already in the past, just with Jamdat and games, had an $800 million outcome. We've got a company called NG Moco that publishes games, but it's really a model to be a publisher of other publishers, right? So that's how you got to think about how you get to scale here. Or in Japan, you've got 3 companies with $1 billion plus market cap, all that have 80% plus of their revenue from virtual goods. Virtual goods haven't come here yet. We have a company in our portfolio on the internet called Zynga, which has been reported to be doing $100 million this year, and it's all virtual goods. And so I think we're going to see new forms of monetization come to mobile on 3.0. We all know it's here. In-app purchases, subscriptions, all kinds of things that give developers the opportunity to make more money. On top of that, we've got another factor going on. You've got 40 million units out there right now just on the iPhone alone. I mean, by the end of 12 months from now, is it going to be 80? Is it going to be 100? Where's it going to be in a couple of years? Suddenly you get up into hundreds of millions of users. It's a pretty darn big platform. And then we're just talking about the iPhone. And by the way, I'm not religious about the iPhone. I believe that the best applications from the standpoint of getting distribution to a broader audience will obviously go to other smartphone platforms. It'll be their choice when and which ones. But, we've got billions of users out there. 40% of phones are going to be smartphones. It's massive markets. All these factors are combining in parallel. So if you look right here today and you say, gosh, it's a paper toss app is the #1 app. Well, how are these companies going to be big? Don't look at the paper toss app. Look at apps that we think are really creating a new kind of mobile behavior, a new mobile social network, a new mobile financial services company, a company that monetizes via virtual goods, a new entertainment company, whatever it may be. That has a big vision over the next few years, not trying to find an exit today.
Steve, how has your success changed how you think about making a business around this? I mean, is this something that you want to, incorporate and go off down that road, or is this just a one-time thing for you?
Strictly a lifestyle business. for me, it's meant basically that I've gotten myself to a point where I can pursue my passions and not have to worry about a 9 to 5, which is, I'm not an Empire guy. I'm not a Neil Young. I'm an artist, and for me, a lot of that is about getting my head in a certain space. And like I say, if I had that 9 to 5 construct, it probably wouldn't happen. So that's what's meant for me.
He's not talking about Neil Young, this musician. Neil Young, the CEO of
Of course,
NG
of course,
Moco,
yeah.
our company
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
trying to be a publisher of publishers. Anyway.
So while we're talking about the iFund, Matt, I mean, what are some of the biggest successes that you've seen to date with the iFund? I mean, how much money have you distributed, and what are the where is the money going?
Well, no money. Distributed in our parlance means distributed to LPs. So we haven't distributed money to LPs yet because we just started it, a little over a year ago. But right now we've 7 companies, 5 have closed and been announced. 2 more will close shortly, and that's about half of the $100 million, a little bit more than that. But at the same time, there's no hard cap on the $100 million. So I think this whole iFund, iPhone, and mobile ecosystem is operating at a pace faster than we all expected. So we will exceed that cap. In terms of successes, and you brought up a point earlier. 50,000 applications out there. How in the world, without being featured, can you crack into the top 10 or really chart? And we have a company called Goji, which launched 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago today, I think. They moved up to number 3 on the charts with no featuring from Apple, which means you're getting over 60,000 downloads a day. And it's basically a free and group texting application. And they launched on a Monday, and you just saw the downloads go: 3,000, 6,000, 15,000, 40,000, 60,000. They probably had 5 or 10 pickups in the press. So some of it is just, what's the application called? Does a user get it? I mentioned before, it has to be very simple to the user. They open it, they get it, they want to tell other users about it. But even the way you brand an application, their application is named Text Plus, and it's kind of a cool icon, and people see it. And it's like, okay, I want to download that. So there's a lot of different tactics. Other successes, NG Moco's had a couple of apps that hit number 1. And we've got 2 more companies that are launching shortly. So, and we've had another one launch in the top 20. So of the 3 that have launched so far, all have been in the top 20, and we've got 2 launching shortly. So those are the early successes.
Is there any kind of pattern to the type of application?
I mean, they're inherently different because we're not trying to invest in competing things, although we do have a company called Pinger that's in competition with our company called Goji, unfortunately. And they both have a free and paid texting app. But I would say that the common thread is what I said before around kind of what we've learned that's made apps successful on the iPhone. Keep it simple, make it valuable to the single user, make it easy to understand in the first 30 seconds, and try and make it so even the icon and the name of the application is understandable to people. Get good reviews. You need to get a pop. What happens is when you come out with a new application, there's an RSS feed that everyone who gets it says, there's a new app. And that's the easiest way to get an initial pop, because everyone gets that. It's like, oh, let me try out this new app. So that's your best chance to kind of get charted in the top 100, and that takes about 4,500 downloads per day. So if you can get there into the top 100, then you're visible in that top 100 stack, and it starts becoming a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. But to move up beyond that, obviously you have to have a great app that people like.
Okay. Pam, I think it's your turn. Let's talk a little bit about the pre and WebOS and where things stand with that at the moment. I mean, you've made some allusions to your future SDK. I mean, can you give us an update of where things stand with that and what developers who are thinking about your handset should expect?
Yeah, we shipped on the 6th, so just about a week and a half ago, is that? It feels like a lot longer to some of us. Fabulous reception. We've been really gratified sometimes when you've been so heads down and in stealth mode for as long as we were with the phone and the platform. It's hard to predict what the reception is going to be, and we've been incredibly excited about both end-user reaction to the phone and developer reaction. I mean, we were seeing from the time we announced at CES a lot of inbound communication to us from not just our traditional developer community, but the people that we're really trying to reach out to, which are web developers. You know, part of the strategy of the platform, recognizing that we have a 1.0 platform, was how can we, from a standing start, reinvigorate a developer community, and the strategy was really to align with the web, to align with where we see development headed in general, with a web-centric development model. And that's got the web community, you know, the 100 million websites that are out there, as excited as our traditional developer community. So we've got a private pre-release program going with the SDK. We're putting finishing touches on that. We're working on scaling the infrastructure for distribution. And we're saying patience grasshopper a lot to folks, but we're pretty close, and we're pretty excited about what we're seeing in terms of the ideas that people give us. You know, we talked about, is it too late? You know, what are strategies? The merchandising and the discoverability and how these things work is going to evolve dramatically. This is early days. I mean, these are devices that people are doing the pat down, right? These are we're talking about platforms and devices where you drive to the corner and you turn the car around if you realize that you don't have your phone with you. So it's something that has an incredible power of relationship with end users, and it creates tremendous opportunity for developers of every kind, and we're seeing that, and they're telling us about it.
When it comes to the time when you're ready to start, you know, accepting and distributing applications, what type of control do you guys plan to exert over that process?
In the near term, we're focusing a lot on assuring that the developers are taking advantage of the platform itself, so taking advantage of the opportunities to integrate, that they're doing a good job of managing the user interface and the navigation of the device, which is a little bit different. If you're coming from another platform, you got a little bit that you learn. So we're doing a lot of hand-holding right now with our showcase and preview developers. Over time, we'll review, and we will be the distribution channel. We have an on-device catalog that we've got in beta form on the device right now. But our objective is to let developers build things that let our end users have a terrific experience, and that's going to be something that the market itself is going to end up deciding.
All right. Here's another question from the audience. I think this one is for you, Adam. Recently, Apple started rejecting all apps written on the PhoneGap framework. Write once, use on multiple platforms. What makes RoMobile different, and why should we try it and risk rejection by Apple? Thank you.
So, thank you. It's a great leading question. I just blogged on this recently, so if you go to romobile.com/blog, I've got a rather long answer. I'll try to do a shorter answer to it this time. So, what I basically said in the blog is, you know, a few years ago, people weren't really using apps on their devices. And so I'm enormously grateful for the fact that the App Store and the iPhone really changed the game and made consumers comfortable downloading apps to their devices. Just a few years ago, we were all lamenting about, hey, users aren't doing this. Part of the way that they did that is that the implicit guarantee that they made when testing apps on the App Store, that the app did what it was designed to do and no more. So what we did in our framework is we bent over backwards to make sure that when you compiled an app, it could, even though we used web standards, like you could write your app with HTML templates, and then we had this Ruby for the controllers, we purposely made it so you compiled the Ruby down to an executable and you compiled the HTML templates down to an executable. So once that app is shipped, it's baked. You cannot change it. So there are a couple other frameworks that are out there on the market that are JavaScript based. And I really like the PhoneGap guys, and they've said they've like referred people to us, and we've referred people to them, and it's helping to legitimize the category. I have expressed on the blog my concerns about a framework that's JavaScript oriented, because if you're doing all your business logic in JavaScript, then an app can do one thing today, and then you download the JavaScript and it does another thing tomorrow. So I hope they resolve those issues, because I think having a marketplace of these kinds of frameworks is good, but I actually said on my blog I believe that that's a legitimate, that Apple is legitimate in their concerns and they're doing the right thing. So because we did this, just parenthetically, because we've bent over backwards to compile it down to the shipped executable, we've never had an app rejected.
But how's that different from all the apps that ship with an embedded browser anyway on the iPhone, where you can deliver whatever content you want?
This is absolutely, and in fact, I mentioned this in the blog. I said there's loophole, right, like to this, which is anybody that wants to use the Web UI view control, right? Theoretically, you can use the fact that Web UI view control can point to a page that has JavaScript, and that JavaScript can do whatever. So theoretically, anybody that uses the Web UI view control can just point to a page that has some JavaScript, change the JavaScript tomorrow. However, the reason why they incorporated the use of the Web UI view control is so people could leverage existing web content, not so that they could change the functionality of the app. There's some stuff in PhoneGap where you can actually hook business logic into, you can basically change what the actual JavaScript does. So it's sort of like the JavaScript power tool. So it's very exciting as a developer, but given what that implicit promise that they made, I think that their concerns are legitimate, and I hope that that they're addressed, because I'd like to see other frameworks besides us in the marketplace.
As a developer, Steve, what do you think of that approach? Is that something that interests you to get onto that type of platform, or do you prefer the one device approach?
I get, we do native, but I mean, I get asked a lot, Steve, I have this idea, I'm not really a developer, how can I really do this? So I definitely think there's a space for these middleware options. Yeah, I'm a big believer. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's take another audience question, and this is a good one, because this is sort of at the heart of making money and building a business off of these things, and somebody wants to know, how much should I charge for my app? And Tyler, I want to start with you, because you guys are doing things a little bit differently than some of your competitors on this score. You seem to have a little bit of a different theory on pricing, so why don't you address that first?
How do I answer that question, Tom? I mean, there's the models that we're seeing. I'll give you a glimpse into what we're seeing, and hopefully that will help give you an idea. We are seeing a lot of vendors taking the free app today, see where we go tomorrow approach to garner up a large user base. It's fairly apparent that users are quite comfortable downloading free applications, but may have hesitation to paying up front because, again, in the mobile space, you don't have that same opportunity than when you're on a PC where you can just suddenly go off and do a ton of research and see, is it really worth that? So, we do see a lot of people going towards that free today, either as a free trial, get them hooked, and then enter in a subscription, or free today and then ultimately add in new features that are then optional premium services on top of that. I think that we're going to see a lot more of that subscription model in mobile apps. I think even in the gaming side of things, we're going to see an evolution to less and less one-time paid, more and more applications that either have in-app purchasing or actually monthly subscriptions where they add enough service behind it to make it relevant to a user where you would pay an ongoing subscription. And so we're actually seeing a lot of that shifting happening in the mindset of apps, where on the desktop, apps tended to be either really an app or content. And in the mobile space, we're seeing a lot more things structure themselves as services. And so it's something that a user is interested and willing to pay a 99 cents a month or something like that because they feel like they're getting something. It's proactive notifications. It's some level of personalization that they're getting in this that they wouldn't have gotten elsewhere. So again, those are some interesting things that I think will start to happen over the next couple of years. And so again, obviously it depends on the nature of the application. But today what we're seeing be most successful on our platform are apps that get in free to get the user base, to get built up, and then offer them, don't just start charging them for the heck of it, offer them premium services that really are worthwhile to pay for, either as a one-time bang or ongoing monthly subscriptions. And don't make that any more than a few dollars a month.
Yeah, I'll add to that a bit. So right now you see tons of apps that have a free and a paid version, right? It's light and full. And basically the download ratio of free to paid in situations like that is usually at least 10 to 1. And basically when you get that level of downloads, essentially you've built a free ad network for yourself. So every time somebody plays the game, you advertise and say, hey, but how about try this paid version? So instead of going out and paying AdMob, which might cost you 50 cents for $1 per user, you basically put a free application out there and you can advertise all day long and hope that you can, convert them. And now people are doing something called link exchange, where you share your inventory across applications, which is a great idea for all you guys. It seems like other pricing models, I agree, subscription's a really interesting one, and in-app purchase, so that you have a continuing, ongoing revenue stream. 99 cents seems to be pretty much the disposable price point. Nobody thinks about it. Above that, you get a significant drop-off. At the same time, we haven't seen, this is all kind of anecdotal, you don't see a lot of price sensitivity between $1.99 and $5.99. So a lot of people are looking at, okay, maybe I'll take half the downloads or a fourth the downloads, but charge $5.99 instead of 99 cents, and I still come out ahead. So everybody's still trying to figure this out. But I think if you want tons of downloads, 99 cents is kind of painless. If you're really trying to monetize highly with lower amount of users, $5.99 is a good price point.
Yeah, I think the history from the Palm OS applications, which we have a lot of data about, tends to suggest that the nature of the app is really the driver of the value equation. So things that are great advertising supported things are things that have high levels of regular engagement, right? Things that are great subscription models are things where the content is refreshed on a regular basis. Things that have a great license model profile would be productivity apps and things that people really get their own content deeply embedded into. And that's been pretty consistent across the 10-plus years that we've been looking at mobile apps and the patterns around mobile apps.
Steve, you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's, yeah, I agree.
All right.
Did you guys change pricing at all, Steve, throughout your life of your app?
It came out at $5. We went down to, I think it's at $3 now. I'm kind of hesitant to talk about this just because of the fact that with the amount of press I've gotten, I'm kind of in a bubble. And I just don't want to sound kind of high and muddy about it, that's all.
But, what Steve did cleverly, and some companies do this, you start out at $5 and you get the people that are completely price insensitive. And then you go down to $3, and then you start picking up the people that were more price sensitive, and then you go down to 99 cents, and then eventually you give it away, and then you get a free ad network, and you try and sell your next application. So
Sure.
a bunch of strategies like that.
I mean, without getting into specifics, did you see a noticeable bounce when you dropped the price?
It was difficult because that's when I got on CNN, and the bump was because of that, I think, not because of the price. I'd have to say that I think, no, it probably would have sold the same.
Okay.
It's the truth. I don't, yeah.
So here's one that kind of coming at this from a different standpoint. Someone who is a handset manufacturer wants to know, what are the 3 most important features my hardware needs to support to make my platform attractive to the app developer community? So we've been talking a lot of software tonight. Let's talk a little bit about hardware. What do you need to have?
I have an opinion that like you need I guess everybody knows that you need GPS and you need camera and you need well, good push. I don't know if you consider that a good push capability, like Apple's come out with a pretty good one there. I think that some hardware manufacturers underestimate how good a quality that you have to do that. They just go for the checkbox and they don't necessarily go for the quality. So I'll give you 2 cases in point. I love my iPhone, but I'm just so tweaked by how bad the pictures are on it, and it just amazes me. It's still 2 megapixels, and now it's only going up to 3. And then the optics aren't as good as my Nokia N95. And then I don't know if anybody's we play with a lot of different devices, so I've got the Windows Mobile, HTC Fuse is a great device. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's actually a really good email device. And it just can't get a GPS signal to save its soul. So I would like to see hardware manufacturers not just do the checkbox, but really compete on quality in those areas.
Bluetooth. What were you asking me?
That's something for me. Yeah, I mean, you've captured them from my perspective. We focus on GPS. We focus on consistency from one device to the next is probably a good piece as well. If you are developing multiple types of hardware, try to have some level of consistency and quality consistency across them. Memory, available memory, removable memory, SD card capabilities is something that's been, of course, very welcomed in our world. Removable batteries are very useful things to. Steve?
Oh God, I've stepped into something here. You know, as a developer, when I looked at the iPhone, it looked more like a gaming device to me than a cell phone. Everything before that had kind of a cell phone feel. Things were kind of clunky, and you would try and scroll down, and like on a Windows mobile device, it just didn't feel like snappy enough. And to me, that was kind of a high bar of, you know, will people approach this device as a legitimate gaming device? And this is more software than hardware, I suppose. But I suppose just being able to approach the consumer as a legitimate gaming device would make it, you know, more successful in that space. So.
Along those lines, as somebody points out astutely that smartphones are still a very small percentage overall of the mobile market. And so how do you guys think about feature phones? Is there a developer opportunity on feature phones as they stand now? Are feature phones losing steam with all this emphasis on smartphones?
So I think if you look at on current shipments, I think very small is probably an exaggeration. It's like well over 20%, getting up to 30%, right? So
that seems a bit high to
probably
me. I don't
not
have the
very
numbers,
small.
but anyway.
It's certainly where the growth, and you're certainly seeing conversion of feature phones to smartphones on the part of users.
Yeah, and it's where the monetization will be in a certain, you know, demographic that you want to address. And on top of that, I mean, smartphones, you can get an iPhone for $99. I think you can get some smartphones now for about $49. Yeah, the issue is the data plan. The data plan's really the impediment now, not, you know, the phone cost itself. But, you know, for what people want to do on the phone today, is $75, $80 a month reasonable versus your $50 Metro PCS plan? Probably.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is the demographic who's choosing those different devices. And I think we've seen users who tend to be apt for wanting applications to be moving into the smartphone space, not surprisingly. And so we don't see a lot of investment in that on the feature phone side. And from the carriers as well, in terms of promoting them as application devices and with large data plans. They seem to be sort of, you know, splitting away with, you know, data plans are generally going to be more focused on app-centric devices. Phone-centric services will really push down the importance of the data plan and service a completely different market and demographic of users. So I think we're starting to see that split now.
Okay. There's a question for Steve. How critical was your own marketing, and at what point did Apple feature your app? As in, was your app already achieving great sales prior to Apple's feature?
My own marketing was all viral. I've never bought advertising for it. The way it all started was I wrote a demo and then shopped it around the GDC, and nobody bit. It was awful. I walked around and everybody's like, iPhone's too new, we don't know what to do with it. And I was like, well, that's fine. I'm just this kid who's walking the floor randomly. But I was like, I know this is something. All my friends have liked it so far. So I did a YouTube video just saying, you know, this is who I am. You know, if you're interested, let me know. Steve Jobs, hey, how you doing? And and you know, that got like 100,000 hits in the first 4 days. So that set in motion like just a community. I set up a mailing list and a forum, and that kind of carried me forward, and it was all word of mouth. So that was really the bulk of what I did. Before I guess it did for itself. You had two questions there. That was the marketing plan I did. What was the second?
Yeah, well, they wanted to know, I guess, at what point when Apple featured your app as a featured App Store app, like what, you know, I guess the assumption is that that took it to another whole nother level. Could you talk about a little bit about how that happened? And
they approached me about 3 weeks in. This is really embarrassing, actually. I bought this thing like in October. My mom had got me an iPod Touch for Christmas that year, and that's what I used to write Trism on. And it was like, I'll always remember they had me down to Apple campus, and my Windows mobile phone rang in the middle of the meeting. And I was like, no. But after that, I was kind of like, yeah, I need to get more into Apple now. So that's really it.
You had a question about featuring. So again, anecdotally, I've seen applications that were featured, and then as soon as they came off being featured, downloads went down by 10x. So it does matter. Now, you know, I don't think that's every case, but you definitely see a dip.
how can you get on those featured lists? I mean, what do you have to do? Do you have to just catch somebody in the marketing department's eye the right way someday, or
yeah,
how does that
they
work?
have a fantastic developer relations group, and really, you know, by vertical, and I don't know how the lay developer gets in touch with them. I mean, you can get in touch with them over email and so forth, but you know, for the applications they like, they'll do everything from full UI reviews to full development and design reviews, marketing plans with you, and so we've been through this with a lot of the iFund companies. It's like nothing I've ever seen in terms of their level of engagement once they get enthusiastic about it. And they have a whole, you know, group internally that socializes different applications and decides which ones are going to be featured or what's hot, et cetera. But there's no real formula to it except to get in front of them and impress them.
If Steve likes it, huh?
Yeah. That's the, if you can get to Steve, then it's all easy. But right now, it's pretty, from the standpoint of getting things featured, is actually fairly democratic. There's a bunch of people involved in making that decision.
If I could add one thing, I think one thing you hit on is very accurate. It's write an app that you know Apple will like. I'm serious. This is, you know, the company that does it. Take a look at what won in the Apple Design Awards this past year. These are not apps that I really even knew of. These are, you know, Topple, of course, but you know, there was a postcard app that just screamed Apple. It was so well designed, and I could see, you know, John Galensi's face light up when he was just demoing this thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's really it, you know. There are a certain type of app that they literally look for to show off, to say this is what really makes the iPhone shine. So I think if you want to get featured, that's probably your best ticket.
Yeah, take advantage of new device capabilities and a new user experience. That's what they're really looking for right now. Show me new ways that people can use their iPhone.
Well, that is a nice segue into this question for Pam and Tyler. And Tyler, you had said earlier that you need to showcase the platform, you know, when it comes to your device as well. And so someone would like both Pam and Tyler to provide some example of features that make their platform unique relative to other platforms that they'd like to see developers take advantage of to highlight those devices.
Okay, I'll take a first stab at that. So on the BlackBerry side of things, the one thing that we feel we do very well, and a lot of applications really take advantage of, is the fact that you can have your application running all the time in the background. So applications on BlackBerry can auto-start, can be running. It's a truly multi-threaded OS, and that app can be doing anything it wants in the background. It can be listening for incoming data coming from the network. It can be registered listeners on the different applications on the device. And so we see a lot of applications that are very proactive with users. So you don't even have to start the application, and it notifies you, you know, an hour after you wake up that the weather has changed, and updates the icon on the home screen and plays a tone to you. So we're very much, you know, we come from that with our user base of that sort of seamless experience. Don't make the user worry about the technology and the interface. What they need to know about is the information. And so we focus a lot on that, on apps that offer that simplistic user experience and don't necessarily require proactive action. Integration with, location-based services, as was mentioned earlier. We see a lot of applications doing very interesting things with GPS and starting to take advantage of that. And also device-side integration into the native applications on the device. And this comes back to the seamless experience and making it really feel like it's a native app. We see some interesting ways people integrate with the address book, with the calendar, with the email application, with the phone application. And our developers have spent a lot of time baking and building out those APIs, so they're quite proud to show those things off. So can I do a shameless plug real quick?
I think that's,
you don't mind. So we have we just launched a developer contest along with the BlackBerry Partner Fund guys that we're running up until our developer conference in the fall. And last year we ran the developer conference, and it was basically winners were announced at our developer show. This year we actually, this is kind of fun, we're excited about it, we're actually doing monthly winners, and the winners will get featured in App World. So if you are one of the apps that is chosen as a great application as part of our developer challenge, you will get a featured spotlight in App World for a week. And so we're really trying to do that to, again, recognize what apps we feel are give a really great user experience and a high quality, which, again, is really what we look at when we look at what we want to feature in the store, is what's getting a great experience, what's getting good reviews from users, and would we be comfortable putting our brand behind that? And we try to keep a look at everything that's out there.
Before Pam jumps in, I'm just wondering if you at this point are looking more for consumer BlackBerry apps, given the fact that you have such a historical strength in the enterprise and you've been trying to shift that over the last couple of years. Would you have a better chance of getting featured in App World if you're doing a consumer BlackBerry app?
I mean, we do put a mix in there, and we intentionally keep a mix. We try to keep a couple of games in there all the time. We try to keep a couple of more business-focused applications for the business professionals. They tend to be things like time trackers, time and expense trackers, sales trackers, and things like that. But the bulk do sit in the middle. We typically have at least one or two multimedia applications spotlight. So some of the music applications are always sitting in the top few. And we also try to maintain a good set of news and content services, because, again, we've seen that very well received from our users. So we do try to maintain a bit of a spread in type of applications, but certainly it lends more towards the consumer side and knowing that we want to appeal to the broadest market. The other interesting piece is when you look at globally, the assumption typically here is sort of a North American focus. And today we're in the US, Canada, and the UK with our App World. And so we're more and more looking for apps for that UK market as well, where the community isn't as strong there for a number of reasons. And so we more and more look for what can we feature for users in those countries. And as we roll out to new countries over the course of the year, and we expect other stores to see this as well, is looking for great content for those countries. And the developer community may not be as mature there because the brand isn't as mature there. So it's actually a pretty good opportunity for North American developers.
Go ahead, Pam.
A lot of the same things in terms of how we look at it, in terms of differentiation of the WebOS platform, what we call synergy, which is the very deep integration across all of the core applications. And this is a really interesting thing for people to consider how to use that, because that gives you on the device a much greater degree of discoverability of what's going on in your app. So you may have an app that does one function and it launches as an app, but you have the ability to share some piece of your experience within the other applications on the device. So the thing that we call synergy, that is really managing the user experience of integrating the devices, is a particular differentiation of WebOS. Our notifications, again, are really different. The notification panel on WebOS is not just a text string and a little icon that crawls across the bottom. That's really a miniature application panel, and you have a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do there. So you see things like Pandora giving you the ability to actually have a control in that notification area, so you can stop and start the player as well as rate the thing that you're listening to right from the notification panel, with other applications running in the background without having to modally deal with something else and stop what you were doing. So that universal search, the ability to see what's on the device as well as go off onto the web somewhere to do a query about something. Take advantage of a real keyboard, for God's sake. I said that out loud, didn't I? There are some really great and really accessible and easy to use differentiated pieces of user experience that it takes a little digging to start to work with and learn with a new platform, but people are getting really excited about them.
Okay. So we're just going to throw it open for the moment. We'll take a couple of questions from the audience, and I guess we'll try to, in the interest of doing this rationally, just grab this gentleman right here, and then you, and then let's see where we go.
I have an app that is really a platform, and you have one thing that hasn't been addressed is if you're trying to create basically a new business where you use the app on the mobile device, but it really ties into a bigger platform. It provides a service. Do you have any ideas or thoughts about how to get, it becomes a chicken and the egg problem that you have with any internet business, but do you have any thoughts about that as it applies to mobile devices?
Well, I think coming out with a hit app gives you the right to try to be a platform. Companies that seem to fail those who come out and try and be a platform before they've established any great consumer value proposition. So in the case of NG Moco that we talked about before, our game company, they came out with a bunch of their own titles. They've got a social gaming network, a points rewards, virtual goods fabric that other companies can leverage. But the fact that they've established a brand that other people might want to publish under them gives them the right to be a platform. So that's a starting point, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true, is establish a relationship and a value proposition to the end user and drive your platform from there.
It's now standing panel. I have a quick question for Matt, and then I have just some feedback on the pricing with iPhone 3.0. So Quick has not been able to legally run in the App Store for iPhone, and this is a question here for Matt. But iPhone 3GS will have video capture. So are we going to then see, is there any insight into seeing Quick become available for 3G? Or what is the holdup? What is the reason?
Well, before they didn't allow video, so that was the holdup. Now they do. I don't see them restricting video apps because they want to own the video player per se. I mean, generally they expose these things and they want apps to grow up around them. I mean, I don't think they're going to view that they're going to try and monetize that, or that's going to give them some competitive advantage by them trying to be quick. So to them, you saw in the WWDC, it's like, okay, do I want to post to YouTube, send an email, send an MMS, and you could see over time, do I want to send via Quick or Kite or whomever, or basically you'll just have Quick and Kite applications on the iPhone that leverage the APIs to access the camera. That's the way it will play out.
So then likely the existing user base will be able to use a Quick application?
That I don't know, whether they're going to allow that into the existing devices. The S, I imagine they will. And then I think also you had to get through a bit of carrier issues about carriers still being somewhat panicked about video.
And then a follow-up for your question on pricing. I was at the San Francisco Music Tech, and the guys from Tapulous were there, and they made a great comment about pricing after 3.0 comes out. And they said everything will drop to 99 cents because of the transactions, and that you can't do transactions on the free apps, but that you can on paid apps. So they believe that all pricing is going to drop to 99 cents.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's for companies that have content to sell, whether it be virtual goods or game levels or whatever, post a sale. I think there'll still be some companies that feel like they don't really have, they want to just get an app out there, sell it for $3.99, and then they're done with that app. So I don't think that's applies universally. And I also think you'll still see a lot of people with the free and paid model where you have a free app, and then you say, click here to upgrade to the paid version, which is 99 cents, and then you sell all the virtual goods inside that after that. It's going to be exciting.
Anybody over way in the back there? Yep. Yep, go ahead.
So today, Adobe had mentioned during their earnings call that they had Flash on all major smartphone platforms, at least in beta by default. They took the iPhone, and I was just wondering if you saw that as a potential new opportunity for developing content and applications.
Go for it.
I mean, from my perspective, we haven't seen announcements from many, if any, smartphone manufacturers, I think, recently to validate that. I think that Flash is a very interesting platform. I think the web platforms are equally interesting in terms of the types of apps that you'll start to see. I expect over the next couple of years we will start to see some of that come together. I think richer web platforms across the base of handsets and support for multimedia capabilities, whether it be Flash or Silverlight or JavaFX or one of those technologies. I mean, I think we're moving in that direction. From my perspective, the issue still today is the hardware requirements for any of those advanced technologies and the amount of memory required and processing power. I think at some point they'll start to meet in the middle, but I think we're still a little ways away from it. And I don't know that anybody can make any bets around will it be a consolidated platform or will it continue and grow in fragmentation. I don't think anybody really knows yet.
Japan's a good proxy for this because they've had flash in browsers for a long period of time. And if you look at that market, it's really a browser market, not a download market. I think we're going to be a download market for a long time. But I think a number of applications will move into the browser. And you really see hybrids about what we were talking about before, where a lot of the content is actually delivered in a browser inside the application. And the download is really just a framework around HTML.
So we're going to take one more. I don't know. Sure.
All right. So, I'm a Stanford student, or I was. I just graduated.
Congratulations.
So my question was, I went to the VLAB event a couple of months ago, and it was regarding the music industry. So the question is, the record labels are going downhill because they're trying to control all the processes of which teenagers, young adults are getting inundated with information. But now with like the iPhone, Palm Pre, the BlackBerry Storm, these people who actually control the devices, are they going to move into more distribution as far as promotion? Because I can see like the record labels going in and saying, hey, promote these bands, paying you guys to, maybe play their song as a ringtone for a week or a day. Or I'm just an example, but that kind of switch of paradigm.
Well, look at Nokia. It comes with music, right? I mean, it hasn't been a huge success so far, but they're going super long on music for the reasons. They think the #1 hit application on phones is music. That's what people want. And so they're going to very specific a bunch of devices that are really music devices as a starting point.
I think an interesting paradigm we're seeing in that industry, and I work quite a bit with the labels and some of the other folks in the industry, is there's a shift there. It comes back to something we talked earlier about, is it's being shifted into a service type model rather than there's a lot of that sort of notion of music in the cloud, and it's not like it was 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. It's not about collecting music, it's about accessing music, and it's about a service-based infrastructure to have the rights to access certain content and to pay a small premium to have those rights. And seeing interesting services build up around them. So that's happening in the music industry, and it's actually very interesting because now that those different business models are there for different ways you're allowed to monetize access to content, we're seeing all these cool ways that people are using it. On BlackBerry, one of our favorites is Slacker, which offers the streaming model, but then they also have the rights to cache it locally on the device, so you can play it back locally, but it still plays back in a radio-style fashion. So they sort of get the best of both worlds, where you get it free because it's radio, but they have the rights to cache it locally on the device. And when you're connected again, it will rejig your playlist, download new music, and give you a fresh playlist. So there's interesting business models coming out of it, but we'll see it in a lot of different industries where they'll move away from content and transaction-specific things into a much more service-centric model and a connected sort of experience, which I think is what we see with Nokia.
Well, I guess that's going to do